Okay, well, good afternoon to most of you, good evening to some of you, and who knows what else. So this is a wonderful panel that is about cancer and 3 exciting startups that are dealing with it. Full disclosure, I'm an investor and in fact sitting in the office of Ezra. I'm an investor in BAMF and I'm a friend of CancerIQ and Feyi. And I like these 3 companies. They're all different. They're all special and unique. And we're going to basically have a conversation here, less than a Q&A and certainly not presentations. And these 3 companies don't know one another. I've put them in order: Feyi first, then Emi, then Anthony. And there's kind of a reason, because Feyi sort of starts upstream with genetics. Emi is focused on screening and diagnostics, and Anthony is focused on sort of screening later stage and then actually zapping cancer, which is the way it ought to be. So Feyi, can you tell these 2 people a little about your company, and all the other people listening will get to hear as well?
Wonderful. Well, thanks for inviting me. And I believe in the future of the world that you do, where everyone at an early stage, and as much as possible, really understands their risk or their predisposition to cancer. Because cancer is a disease that is very different and can have different strategies of tackling it. And if we understand your genetic predisposition, if we understand any social determinants of health or any of those things that may increase your risk of getting cancer, we can put you down the right clinical pathway to make sure that we're truly getting ahead of it. That's what CancerIQ does. That's what CancerIQ enables at scale. We're a software company that predominantly sells into health systems so that we can help your doctor risk stratify the entire patient population and put you on the right pathway. To do that, we need software that can appropriately stratify risk and make it easy for everyone to get access to genetic testing. But then we also need really intelligent software to make sure that your provider knows which one of these options that's available to them is appropriate, so you can individualize people's cancer screening, prevention, and also treatment. So we're really in the precision prevention space as opposed to the precision medicine space, where we're helping doctors use data, including genetic data, to drive those early detection, prevention, and really helping everybody stay ahead of cancer.
And so you start with like a family history or something you don't start with the genetics, you kind of start with the implied genetics.
Yeah, absolutely. The cheapest genetic test that's available really is your family history. And unfortunately today, most people are collecting that information and it's being scanned into the middle of nowhere and not really appropriately interpreted. So we're helping providers interpret a lot of the data they're already collecting so it can set them on this pathway to ordering genetic testing if it in fact is appropriate.
And do you feel that it's working? I mean, how eager are doctors to do this? You'd think they would be, because it was, they could do referrals and feel more valuable, but what are the barriers?
So I think the initial barriers are really just time, and that's really what the CancerIQ platform solves for. If you're like me that has 31 first cousins, for the doctor to interview me and understand my complete family history and just gather the data needed to understand my level of risk, that would be a non-starter. So having software in place that makes it truly the easy button for a provider is one of the barriers that CancerIQ has already tackled. Now, once you've tackled some of those workflow barriers and time barriers, it's then about, how do you align incentives so that the entire health system is urgently looking to do this. That's a problem we solve really through data and showing those clinical outcomes. because in health systems, we know people don't just do things out of the kindness of their heart, unfortunately. But we have seen that they're more willing to do this activity of risk stratification and precision prevention for two reasons. One, there's kind of a revenue reason. By identifying those patient populations that are at higher risk than other patient populations, you uncover additional high-risk screening or service opportunities that the health system can offer. So we found that there's a very strong financial incentives for health systems to do this at scale. But then we also find that there's a really strong quality incentive for people to do this at scale. Over the history of CancerIQ, we've now been able to demonstrate that number one, we can improve cancer screening compliance for all patient populations, not just our high-risk patient populations. But we've also found that we're starting to stage shift and actually demonstrate to our health system partners that we can detect cancer earlier if there's a population kind of CancerIQ strategy than if there isn't something like CancerIQ in place. So because of their really strong financial and clinical incentives or outcomes that you can get from doing things the CancerIQ way, those are other reasons that doctors are spending time on this particular category.
And amazingly, if you found someone was at high risk for cancer, you could call up Ezra and they would be glad to receive your call. They, at this point, are not focused on insurance. They're focused on private pay. But Emi, why don't you take that patient journey along? Feyi's just sent you somebody. What do you do?
For sure. Thank you, Esther, and thank you, Feyi. So I feel the need to start the kind of bit of an overview on Ezra with some bad news, which is that 1 in 3 people on this call will get cancer. Actually, 1 in 2 if you're male. So for the guys on this call, we can flip a coin and we'll basically know whether we have the probability of getting cancer or not sometime in the future. Now, the worst part of this news is that about half of us will detect cancer late. And the reason we'll detect cancer late is because if we take the current standard of care screening procedures, mammogram for breast, colonoscopy for colon, low-dose CT for lung, pap smear, and PSA blood test for prostate, they only account for about 50% of all cancer incidents. So for those of us who are unlucky to get brain cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic, etc., we're likely going to find it when it's symptomatic, which is likely going to be late. And so what we've developed at Ezra is a way to screen for cancer in all of the different organs that you can't currently screen for. Well, we've developed a full body MRI that takes about 60 minutes. It's analyzed by 2 radiologists, is powered by a series of AIs that screens for cancer in 13 organs. And it happens to be very complementary to existing standard of care screening. So what we would do for a person who discovers that they have increased risk for cancer based on CancerIQ and Feyi's work is we'd say, well, because you're at high risk for liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, gallbladder, etc., you should get an Ezra full body. The scan currently costs about $2,000, and our goal is to bring it down to $1,000 and ultimately $500. The full body would look for cancer or precursors to cancer in many of these organs. And then we deliver a report to members that tells them whether they have anything that they should be worried about, or whether there are any things that they should do in order to reduce their risk for cancer. We've scanned about 2,000 people over the past 2 years. We've helped 13% of our members find potential cancer, many of whom have done follow-up scans, biopsies. It was cancer, they got treated, and they're now in remission. And that's in a nutshell how we would take the journey from Feyi's work to telling someone whether they actually have something they should be investigating further or not.
And your business model, just briefly?
Yeah, so we partner with existing imaging facilities, outpatient imaging facilities. We buy remnant inventory from them in bulk, which enables us to get really, really good rates. And then we pass the cost savings to consumers. It used to be that you could get a full body MRI if you're a billionaire willing to spend $20,000, $30,000. What we've done is we've decreased that cost significantly, and we've passed all of the cost savings to consumers. And so we have about 16 partner imaging facilities across 4 cities in the US, New York, San Francisco, LA, and Miami. And we actually plan to be in 20 cities by the end of this year. So I'm quite excited about 2022.
And one interesting thing is, because it's not covered by insurance, I kind of expected that Ezra would mostly just serve like rich white men on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. But the reality is we also got truckers from Staten Island and school teachers from New Jersey, because the uninsured also see value in this. It's kind of the middle range that's semi-insured, where their healthcare system says, well, we don't pay for that. You probably don't need it. And
yes. And we actually do a lot to try to make it more affordable. So we accept HSA, FSA dollars. We have a monthly installment plan where you can pay as little as $180 a month. And we're trying to make Ezra more affordable, because we're aware that $2,000 is still a lot of dollars for a lot of people. So all of our tech efforts are actually going towards decreasing our cost base so that we can decrease our prices.
And another thing I worried about, I just want to share, and then I'm going to go on to Anthony, was, just too many false positives. But my own story is kind of interesting. I paid several $1 million to train as a backup cosmonaut to Charles Simonyi. And part of the training is a full-scale medical inspection. They checked out my esophagus, found Barrett's esophagus, and said, wow, this is a precursor to cancer. You should get an endoscopy every year. And in 2016, they found that I had stage 0 to 1 cancer of the esophagus. And that's the stage at which you can just kind of go in and pluck it out. So I had no chemo and no radiation and no symptoms. But if they hadn't found that, I would be dead now. And I always think of that every once in a while. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, supposing I actually had cancer, Anthony, what do you guys do?
So what we're doing over here is actually trying to achieve a new concept called intelligence-based precision medicine, meaning we acquire the comprehensive information and turn it into useful intelligence, and use the intelligence to guide us to how to treat this kind of cancer. And we also developed the tools allowed us to fill the gap to acquire the right information, and also target cancer to treat it accordingly without hurting surrounding tissues. So right now, the problem of cancer right now is every single step we are trying. Cancer is a complicated disease, and it's changing all the time. Every single tumor in patient's body in the same individuals is very, very different. What we're doing right now, because we're limited by the current technology, if we do biopsy, trying to take a genomic proteomic informations, basically we just got the information from that tissues we take out, or from that specific tumor. But when the tissue start to grow in the lung, will be very, very different from the tumor grow in the original tissue, like prostate or ovary, because the environments are very, very different. So in order to just rely on the biopsy information to decide how to treat the patients and understand and assume all the tumor in patients body gonna respond the same, it's just a play the odd. It's too risky. So what we're trying to do over here is we're bringing a brand new technology called the molecular imaging, or the radioactive tracer with a PET. It's allowed us to understand the molecular compositions of every single tumor in patient's body, and then use this information combined with the genomic information, proteomic information, and conventional morphological imaging information together to decide what's the right treatment for these patients. And once we identify the tumor, and if we identify right enough target on this tumor, we have a technology called a molecular targeted radiation therapy, or right now a lot of people call it theranostics. It's a new words combined with a therapy and diagnostic together. So
it has a certain aura of Theranos, and so with
yeah, there's no relation. Just yeah, like, I need to claim there's no relationship, any relationship with Theranos. These words come out maybe 15, 20 years ago. So and we use a molecular targeted radiation therapy, meaning directly design a drone will only go to the tumor we can see with specific biomarkers. And using this method, we can actually treat bring up to 50 times of radiation dose to each tumor we see on the images, compared to the conventional radiation oncology department in big hospital system use big LINAC machines and without hurting surrounding tissues. And the reason it won't hurt surrounding tissue is because the isotope we're using will only release all the radiation within 2 millimeter range, meaning we'll burn everything out within 2 millimeters, but everything outside the 2 millimeter will stay unharmed. So that's what we mean intelligence-based precision medicine, meaning we'll collect the right information using the technology Feyi or genomic group have, and like Elm has for the conventional MR and another lab test, and with molecular imaging together, gather the right intelligence and use intelligence to make decision. And then we do targeted strike. So we believe the future cancer, the principle of cancer treatment should be intelligence weighted, targeted strike. And that's what we're doing over here. We're building a platform, facility, infrastructure in order to make these things happen.
And it's not just targeted physically, it's also targeted in time. It uses very short half-life, oh dear, sorry, radiation stuff. And so what it gives you interesting logistics, because you need to make the pharmaceutical right before you put it in the patient, and then the patient excretes stuff, and you can't just have them do that anywhere. They have to do it into a special tank. So just mention a little bit of the logistics and how this actually works in the real world.
Yeah, so in a very, very high level, we're using radiopharmaceutical for two parts. One is for cancer diagnosis, and the other one with the cancer therapy. For cancer diagnosis, we wanted the half life of the isotope become extremely short, because we just want to be able to see the tumor, to see the molecular composition, and we don't want people receive any unnecessary radiation dose on that part. So for this reason, when we design these kind of diagnostic tracers, we choose a shorter half-life tracers, all the way from maybe 2 hours to some tracers only have a 2 minutes half-life. Meaning if we want to apply this kind of tracer into the patients, we need to manufacture those kind of radioisotope on the same day at a strategic location in order to serve these patients. We cannot manufacture this tracer in California and ship to New York, or like even in India, ship it to all over the world, like a conventional drug. And that's give us a lot of obstacles for adopting this useful and new technology. And that's why BAMF Health is coming in to build the technology and the infrastructure in order to make this technology accessible. And then for the for therapeutic part, because we wanted this tracer to stay on tumor for a little bit longer, keep irradiated tumor, keep burning out until we give the tumor enough dose. So usually the half-life of this therapeutic isotope will be about 10 days to up to 6 weeks. However, and the issue of this is because it's targeted, if the drug is not a hit on the tumor, it will be excreted through the urinary system and then make the patient's urine is hot. And so it's not environmental friendly to just release it into the sewer system. So in order to serve more patients, we also need to develop a new technology allowed us to efficiently collect these kind of hot urines from the patients and let it decay, and then then decay to the background, and then we can release it to the sewer system. So what we're doing over here is not just building clinic, building the radio pharmacy, those kind of facility to manufacturing. It's all the technology needed, how to efficiently make this technology accessible, affordable, but also adaptable to the environment.
Thank you. So Evan's going to do the Q&A later, and I see there are some things in the chat, but I'm a little too distracted to read that. But do the three of you have any questions for one another, or is it all clear? Can I get you guys to, create a conglomerate or something of keeping people healthy from start to finish?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like, as you mentioned, we are kind of the front end to that. And I'd be very curious about how we can get more CancerIQ patients over to Ezra. Because again, one of the key things that we've learned is that the one size fits all approach to cancer screening that exists today just doesn't work. There's very clear insurance coverage for everyone to get, a mammogram every year or, colonoscopy every 10 years. But, most patients fall into the category of this elevated risk, either because of, again, genetic risk factors or others. And if there were a more complete pathway for those patients to actually get the screenings that they need, we'd have more positive outcomes like you, Esther. So when we think about how we end cancer as we know it, which is again one of our missions, it's to make sure that as many patients can have cancer detected as early as possible. And sometimes it takes a different screening technique than what's currently available to make sure that happens.
Yeah, and for my opinion, I really think every of us over here play a very important role. I mean, cancer is not like a one technology. I think for a long time, we think there will be one technology, like a magic bullet, and then we can solve it all. And I think this is the time we need to start thinking about that cancer is a very complicated disease, and it keeps changing all the time because every day our body environment change, and the change in our body environment will change how cancer respond to that environment. So how to collect the right information, I mean, at the right time, and also turning it into useful intelligence to decide how to treat the patient, how to identify the cancer earlier. That's critical. For example, I mean, we have treated over 2,000 prostate cancer patients using our method, and we start figuring out there's some patients responded really great and from end stage in hospice care can achieve complete remission, but there are some lighter patients, they just don't respond to the high dose of radiation. And the answer must be hidden in the genomic information. So to understand genomic information combined with our type of therapy will be critical in the future to make a very efficient attack. And then our technology to trying to looking for cancer should make some molecular small, maybe less than 1 millimeter signal pop out on a PET images. We know that they're suspicious, but conventional CT images cannot really figure out where they are. And then at this moment, we really need to use high resolution MR to allow us to really know where the tumors are, what is that tumor or the false positive lesions over there. But those kind of things, MR takes a long time for radiologists to do a detailed review. So the AI combined with MR and combined with the PET images, I really think it will make a huge impact for fast screening, collecting information, and help patient to make right treatment decisions.
So I'm interested in what this all means for, all the people on this call and all the people in this world. There is the genetic predisposition. There's also a lot going on in our environment, the food we eat, the pollution we're near to. And, maybe Anthony, it's not your genetics, but it's the fact that you live next to a power plant or something. I don't know. But I mean, do you think the cancer moonshot, the whole notion of we're going to beat cancer is realistic in a world where people do eat bad food and get exposed to toxins, and some of them still smoke? And just how can we actually beat cancer by destroying it at the end versus eliminating the causes at the beginning?
I fully believe in
Emi.
that.
Yeah, I actually have a perspective on this, which is that cancer, unfortunately, is a kind of very fat tail type disease. You can be vegan, have 8% body fat, live in the cleanest part of Colorado, I don't know where that is,
Costa Rica.
somewhere, and still get cancer because of an abnormal mutation, genetic mutation that turns into an oncogene, that turns into a blob of cells, that turns into a tumor that becomes malignant. And so because it is such a fat tail disease, the rare occurrence of this rare genetic mutation might lead to cancer, even though you're perfectly healthy otherwise, means that the only way to protect against it is to screen often, screen comprehensively, understand your genetic makeup, understand what's going on inside your body. And I think the key part of this screen often is longitudinal data. And to Anthony's point, longitudinal data ultimately analyzed by AIs. Let's say you took a full body MRI every year for a decade, the Ezra AIs would be able to much more accurately identify early signs of potential cancer before they might be even visible to a radiologist. And so my perspective is that we should all get screened much more so than the guidelines recommend, because it really is the best defense against dying from cancer.
So it's the behavior more than the actual look of it in terms of radiology.
I think so. The technology is there. Maybe it's not yet affordable to everybody, but it's getting to be affordable for everybody. The behavior isn't there yet. And even the people who know that they should get full body cancer screening don't yet know of the existence of companies like Ezra or CancerIQ or BAMF Health and so on. So I think there's a lot of education to be done too.
So has any of you done like a nice, beautiful, peer-reviewed paper about, we had 1,000 people do screenings or risk assessments or whatever, and it cost X, and it saved the healthcare system 5X, and of course it saved people's lives, and like where are we improving the return on investment of this? And of course, from an insurance company's point of view, the problem is, for a young patient, they don't really care what's going to happen to them 10 years later because patients churn. But if we had single payer healthcare, it would be much easier to prove this financial point. But let me not get on with that rant. Just what is the ROI of the work you do?
Yeah.
Well, all three of you, one by one.
Yeah, so I can speak to two things. I want to speak to your last one as well, to just echo what Emi said about screening really being the intervention. This is the feedback we hear from clinicians a lot about cancer prevention and early detection. There are multiple chronic diseases that a primary care physician is trying to tackle. It's diabetes, obesity, it's heart disease, it's a number of these different things. And we think about the behaviors, right? The smoking and the eating badly and those kinds of things. Most primary care physicians kind of feel a bit defeated, like unless they're going to be, in that person's kitchen, swatting away the cookies, when they're about to make a bad lifestyle decision, they can't really do much. But where they feel empowered, particularly with solutions like CancerIQ in their hands, is because a lot of the ways that we can eliminate death from cancer are actual clinical pathways, right? Send someone to an imaging service. That's a lot. It's a second line of defense other than behavior modification that can more equitably get to all patients and hopefully detect cancer in that earliest stage. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second is really around this ROI analysis. And at the end of the day, that's what our company is in the business of doing. So we can truly demonstrate a win-win-win for everyone across the board. There are two studies that I would like to point to that CancerIQ is really trying to replicate in real world. So I started this company with my mother, who's a cancer geneticist and medical oncologist at the University of Chicago. And prior to starting this company, I actually worked with her at the University of Chicago, and she was running an MRI study that was really just looking at a huge population of women, doing risk stratification for all of them, and actually looking at the level of risk that these patients had for breast cancer, knowing that there was truly a polygenic spectrum of risk. There are patients who have, BRCA mutations, who have risks as high as 87%. You know what? Those patients might need to get a breast MRI twice a year to detect cancer in its earliest stages, because it's a fast growing cancer that 1 year interval may not be enough for them. She also did, a study on patients who are more at moderate risk, people with familial history, but not a genetic mutation, and studied, the impact of a breast MRI versus an alternating mammogram in the middle of the year to see if they could get to something earlier. And again, there was even this control group of what do we do for these average risk patients? Because if you're truly trying to manage risk across the patient population, you can't just think about those highest risk patients. You need to think about everyone. And sometimes those people who, again, had no additional risk of getting breast cancer, you just need to engage them, make sure they're loyal, make sure they're following up and doing standard of care screening to truly eliminate risk across the patient population. The outcomes of this study were really remarkable, and really showed what the value of precision detection or precision prevention could be. I think, over a longitudinal period of time, they found that even though these patients did develop cancer, they all developed cancer within less than 1 centimeter in diameter when they were diagnosed. And just like you, Esther, these were, cancers that were very easy to treat, very easy to survive. And that's the kind of cancer that you want all women in this category to get. Now, how do you replicate that at scale? It means that you need providers outside of the University of Chicago to be able to do precision prevention and early detection. Because, a lot of what was being studied at the University of Chicago was still within the insurance guidelines. There's coverage for women who are at elevated risk to get breast MRIs. The problem is that the provider doesn't know which one of those patients. So exactly what Emi said, if there's no education about this, if there's no one at point of care who's saying you should go this way versus that way, it's hard to replicate those things that we've learned work in academic settings in places where people are actually seen and treated. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing more of those studies done in actual clinical practice. And that's what we're doing, at CancerIQ on a regular basis with our primary care physicians, offering precision prevention to every patient who walks through the door.
Great. And at some point, brief ad for Pattern Computer, which would, I'm sure, love to look at your data and give you some interesting insights and feedback. Emi, has Ezra done any ROI studies yet or anything like that?
Yeah, so actually, if participants go to ezra.com/full-body, so full body, we actually gathered all of the literature around using MRI for screening when compared to other modalities for screening. So when you're looking at a screening test, you're looking at sensitivity and specificity. You want high sensitivity, ideally high specificity, but there's a trade-off between the two. One of the reasons we chose MRI as the way to screen for cancer everywhere in the body is because it has high sensitivity and specificity across most organs for detecting cancer early. And also it doesn't use ionizing radiation to create images of the body. So you can do one every year safely without any concern. Also, we believe we've now gathered the largest data set of full body MRIs ever done, with follow-up data for people for whom we found potential cancer. We haven't yet published that data, but we're in the process of doing so. And by the end of this year, we'll actually have what we think is going to be the first paper for screening an asymptomatic, healthy population with a full body MRI.
So it's interesting. Feyi's mother was a cancer geneticist, and Emi's previous company was video advertising. It's like two amazing paths. And Anthony, you have a third path. Maybe you can mention that and then talk a little bit about your data.
Yeah, definitely. I would just want to go back to your previous questions. Right now, the cancer moonshot. I'm extremely optimistic about the cancer moonshot this time, because this is the first time in human history we have a lot of tools we don't have 30, 40 years ago when the first time we called that, which is data and AI. I mean, cancer is a comprehensive disease, and cancer is a probability disease. So it's not about there's a one cause of a cancer. Oh, you smoke, you will get cancer. You drink, you can get cancer. You're exposed to this, you will get that. It's a very comprehensive things all about some factor gonna increase your probability to get cancer. But even you do anything, if you have a specific gene or just by random probability, you may have one. So in order to tackle these kind of things, we cannot try to use a conventional game to play with it. We need to play with an odd. And the only way to play with odd is with the data, with a higher computing power to calculate those kind of things. And this is the first time in human history we have this kind of power doing that. We have a lot of data, we have high computing power, and right now is we need to figure out how we're going to combine these two to generate the right intelligence to apply to our cancer treatment. So I totally agree, for a cancer treatment diagnosis, screen is the most important part. But the most important part over here is how are we going to screen efficiently? How frequently we should scan the patients? When should we scan the patients or screen the patients? And what's next to it? For the cancer management, there are so many decisions we need to make as a doctors. And does the patient have the cancer, and what kind of cancer the patient has, and how many are there, where are they, what's the right treatment, and what's the drug to have, what's the dose to have, and then once we give this kind of treatment, does the cancer respond to that? And if it doesn't respond to that, what's the next line of defense? We need to tackle those kind of things. And right now, pretty much in majority of a clinic, 99% of the time, we're doing educated guess in clinic. We don't know if this patient is the patient said in the paper. We just know there's a 40% of chance these patients are gonna be this case. Then let's try this first. And we need to change that. That's why we keep saying this is a precision medicine. We need to treat each patient like an individual instead of just a part of a statistic. So how to combine using the technology to acquire the right information from the patient standing right in front of us and use this information to make a decision is critical. And like what I said, data AI will be the right decision to do. So we haven't conducted any ROI related study, but we have treated 2,000 patients on prostate cancer using our current method, meaning using a new way to diagnose, to catch the cancer, stage the cancer patients, and also use a new way to treat the cancer patients. Just by our first high level estimation, the money saving efficiency improvement is just extremely high. So take prostate cancer, for example. There's a big issue right now is for a group of patients called a biochemical recurrence, meaning the patient have had prostate cancer already, but they have been treated and there's no cancer finding for a long time. But after 3 or 4 years, their PSA is still going up, which is blood biomarker, shows the potential prostate cancer coming back, but it's not going to very, very high level. So at this phase, this group of patients usually being put in a very, very weird positions because doctor think that the cancer is coming back, but no imaging modality can confirm where the tumors are and or even if the cancer coming back. So doctor usually offer like other three images: MR, CT, and bone scan. Hopefully we can find something, but we already know that highly possible we're not going to find too much at this phase. And then there's a lot of money waste over here. We just want to feel lucky when we order this. And on top of that, if we don't see anything, then we'll offer patients 3 options. Number one, we do the hormone or chemotherapy, systemic treatment, just bombard everything. Hopefully we kill something. Or something called salvage radiation, meaning irradiate your whole pelvic area, because highly possible the prostate cancer is going to start from there if they are coming back. Or go home to, we call it sit and watch method, go home to grow your tumor until we can see better. So if you can see the first 2 methods over there, not only we're gonna waste a lot of treatment money, the expensive cancer drugs to the patients on the things we don't even know if it's there. Majority time we forgot is these drugs, these treatment come with very strong side effect. So not only we need to treat patients with cancer, after we finish this kind of round, there's a very long tail. We need to try to treat the patient's side effect using other drug of that. So the money wasting on these kind of trial and error method is very, very huge. And when we are starting using this new method to stage the patients, catch the tumor as small as 1 to 2 millimeter size, I mean, one scan can pretty much replace MRCT and bone scan for these phase of patients. And also directly we can move to the next phase going to decide what's the right treatment to do. If we don't see that, we have very high confidence, pretty much you don't have cancer, you don't need to worry about too much. If we see 1 or 2 small spot over there, then we can actually just decide if this is the best way to using surgical removal or using the targeted conventional radiation therapy, or is using whatever treatment over there. So again, we removed all those kind of guessing and uncertainty from the current management, and that's a significant money saving and a time saving over here.
And I have a suggestion. Another thing you should analyze when you do that paper is the mental state of the patients,
Yes.
because sitting and watching sounds excruciating. Evan is here and I think ready to do audience questions. And honestly, I've been seeing a little bit of the chat, and I'd love to bring the audience in. And I guess that means I should hand over to Evan, because this is a very personal as well as an interesting scientific issue. And I know you guys have questions. So Evan, if you're ready, I'm going to hand over to you, because
yeah, sure. That just gives us a couple extra minutes, which is great because we've got tons of questions. And
yeah,
actually,
exactly.
Emi has been active answering some of the simpler ones, so that's great too because it gives us a leg up.
And I may come back with some of my own, but now I'm part of the audience. Over to you.
So the first question, I think since the ones that Emi answered was from Oliver Dominick. Oliver, are you with us?
Yeah, I was wondering about whether the resolution of detection and treatment for this, what are those scales? Are they similar? Are they millimeter scale? Mm-hmm. How big a tumor can you detect? How big a tumor can you hit?
I'll speak for Ezra for kind of the detection part. We can find, it depends on the organ and the part of the body, but we can find tumors as little as 3 millimeters. And we have actually found tumors as small as 3 millimeters in areas like the prostate.
Yeah. So at the moment, this whole approach, and I'm sorry, I'm a biology guy, but I'm not a cancer guy in any sense of it, fortunately. At the moment, this strategy is entirely based on essentially a visual type of detection. There's no immunology, any molecular biology involved. What are the chances that one can find whether they're antibody-based detection, various tagged antibodies that would allow detection that didn't involve mass, that involved chemistry? Where do you see that going?
Yeah. One of the areas I'm really excited about is the circulating tumor DNA space. So a tumor originates at DNA level, forms a cell that doesn't know how to die, which forms a blob of cells, which forms a tumor. That tumor will shed some of that DNA in the bloodstream. And as it turns out, we can actually identify that DNA and identify that it originates from a malignant tumor. So that space is called the ctDNA space. Really, really excited about it in the context of Ezra, because ctDNA tests have very high specificity, right? If you don't have a tumor that's malignant, you're not going to have DNA originating from the tumor. Therefore, the specificity will always be very high. However, it has very low sensitivity because the tumor needs to be pretty large in order for you to have a lot of signal in the bloodstream originating from that tumor.
Right.
If you look at MRI, MRI has really, really high sensitivity and it has reasonable specificity. So if you pair serially a full body MRI with a ctDNA blood test, you kind of get this protocol that has an overall increased specificity. And that's kind of an area that we're exploring at Ezra that I'm really, really excited about.
Anthony and Feyi, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. So I think there's something conventional imaging like a CT, MRI, ultrasound, X-ray. They're morphological images, and morphological images, they are based on the size of the lesion, and we allowed us to find things. And MRI is one of the most sensitive modalities in the conventional imaging field. And it really depends on which region the tumor was gross. So like what Emi said, that's about usually is a 2 to 3 millimeter size, the smallest we can see. But sometimes if it's in the high contrast regions, we can see smaller things. But to the end, MRI, even there's a lot of technology called MR spectrum, et cetera, can look some of those kind of molecular profile, but it's very inefficient to apply into clinical using. So, but only for molecular imaging or like a PET, positron emission, very different kind of because molecular imaging is a designer tracer specifically looking for biomarker proteins receptors on specific cells. So that's why it's called molecular imaging. It's actually allowed us to see molecular activities in a non-invasive way with location information. So you can consider PET imaging or molecular imaging is in vivo Western blot in the human body. So that's why we're insisted to put this technology, make it accessible to the patient to fulfill a gap what we don't have right now. Not only we can see cancer, but we also know what kind of receptors on the cell surface, what the molecular composition of that specific tumor, which part is HER2 positive, which part is HER2 negative, even within the same tumor. We can see that. And with the advance of with the advance of technology on scanner, we will have a chance to start to see sub-millimeter lesions start from maybe later this year in our institute. So we right now with the current technology, we can see about tumors about 1 to 2 millimeter size. But right now we're going to bring a scanner which is 40 times more sensitive than any other PET on Earth. So we'll significantly improve the sensitivity of that. And again, the PET cannot offer good anatomical information. So it's important to combine PET with MR together, and we can actually improve the sensitivity, improve the specificity, and in order to get a morphology and the biology together to use that information to treat the patients.
So what is actually?
Hey Oliver, I'm going to cut you off. Oh, sorry. I'm going to cut you off because we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and we want more folks later questions answered. Jean Wooldridg, you had a question about technology informing policy. Are you with us here?
Yeah, well, we've danced around the issue of overscreening and overtreatment and some of the other things that happen when people are overscreened for a number of years here on our medical panels. And it's becoming more and more urgent as the population ages. And one of the things that I wrote in the comment was there's a stat article on February 24th where they're estimating that overscreening costs about $21.5 billion a year. That includes private insurance and Medicare. And I was just wondering, you're starting to answer that question, the panelists, with your innovations on how we can start to address that by making things much, much more precise and individual to that. But even now, it's the adoption by clinical practice of looking at watchful waiting for prostate cancer and other things. That's taking a long time to enter into the clinical practice. So I don't know if you have any perspectives. Maybe your technologies will do an end run and make overscreening far, far less of a problem, and overtreatment far, far less of a problem.
Yeah,
Any,
I think that's a
I
great
can speak to
question.
at least how things are done. Oop.
No, go for it, Feyi.
Yeah, I'll just speak about a protocol that is activated, within CancerIQ. We for the most part do stick to the current clinical guidelines. And it's just as important to know that someone is average risk as it is knowing that someone is high risk, right? So we direct people to these clinical protocols where they may need a breast MRI or they may need a prophylactic surgery if they do have, a predisposition or something that puts people in elevated risk. But we've also learned, particularly during the pandemic, that it's valuable to know that someone maybe isn't in that elevated risk category. Some of the ways our providers that are using our software are actually acting on that information is particularly in places where there are backlogs to get screenings right now, right? I don't know if you tried to call and get a colonoscopy recently, but there can be, a 6-month waiting list, right? So what do? You risk stratify the patient population. You can understand who needs to be seen most urgently and who, might benefit from delaying that screening or choosing a more minimally invasive screening like a Cologuard at-home test. So that's how we're seeing this precision approach to screening actually working in actual practice. It's about knowing who's at elevated risk, but also knowing who's at average risk so you can do something that's appropriate for both those patient populations today.
Yeah, and the one thing that I wanted to add, and I totally agree with what Feyi just mentioned, is an important way in which we are going to decrease overdiagnosis and overscreening is longitudinal data. Right now, when you go and get screened, they're starting and they're getting you screened from, if you're doing a colonoscopy, they're analyzing that colonoscopy in the context of that colonoscopy. They should be analyzing that colonoscopy in the context of all your prior colonoscopies, but no gastroenterologist has time to actually go and look at the images and the video from your prior exams. It's happened somewhat with mammogram. It happens somewhat with low-dose CT. It should happen much more, and it should be much more automated. But right now, the technology isn't there yet to fully automate the analysis between these scans. Once the technology will be there, I think that will help decrease overdiagnosis because you'll be able to analyze each scan in the context of all priors.
Yeah, I actually echo both of the panelists over here. I mentioned what is the most important is to screen efficiently, but the answer is how. And then the how are we going to do that is definitely rely on the data. Using genomic information, family history information, and patient current lab data information, we can come out with the risk factors, use the risk factor to decide what kind of screening the patient need to be done, and or like how often and when, at what age people need to do. And these things may not only apply to cancer in the future with aging group, Alzheimer, Parkinson, and cardiac disease, those kind of high risk, devastating disease. We should use in the same principle to tackle that. And the next thing is what kind of things we need to do for screening. Every screen, every test have a price tag, and every scan have a different kind of, or screen have a different kind of pros and cons. So again, using data to decide, understand risk factor to decide what's the most economical ways to do that. Big data can actually show this kind of trend to help to guide us over here. But I think you actually bring up a very good question. Right now, the biggest problem is over-screening and over-treatment. The reason we have over-screening is because it's a devastating disease. And so we don't have efficient like screening tools. So we just want to screen. Hopefully we can find something. And then the other thing about overtreatment is because it's a devastating disease, and we just want to hit it hard until it's disappeared. And we need to think about if this is the right strategy right now. I mean, we were using this strategy, hit it hard, hit it fast, hit it strong for like 50 years. We don't see too much improvement over here. I think what we need to think about is how we're going to manage cancer instead of trying to eliminate every single cancer cell in patient's body. And if we can turn cancer into chronic disease, make it become a high blood pressure, diabetes, and with a very comfortable treatment without a side effect, and also can live for very, very long after their diagnosis, maybe we don't need to keep bombarding patients with all kinds of chemicals right over there. And so I think that's actually the things I hope with this cancer moonshot we can change, the mindset we can change is turn into how to eliminate every single cell from patient's body into how to manage this disease, make patients have balanced the life quality, life expense, and also like economical factor together. I mean, after you're diagnosed with cancer, if you can live pain-free for about 20, 30 years, and take some pills, or like every 5-10 months, you take another shot. I think that will buy us a lot of time to really find that magic bullet or understand what cancer is and offer a better treatment in the future. But if we just always focus on right now to look at, we want to find that the golden key, the magic bullet, I think we miss the big pictures over here.
All right. Well, thank you, Anthony. That is the end of our time. We've got just a couple minutes to head out from this session. Sorry for everybody that had questions that we didn't get to, but at least we got to quite a few of them.
And let me add my thanks to the wonderful panelists and also to the wonderful audience. We hope to come back next year in some form or another with a whole lot of progress and maybe some other additions to the field. But this is exciting work. And thank you three for all you do.
Yeah.
And thank you, Fire.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.